Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I realize that lunchtime is coming, so I will try to run my presentation briefly. I'm sure all of you more or less familiar with the situation in Ukraine, which is, by the way, still highly unstable. I will just remind you that the escalation of current conflict started in February last year, when, with the protests against our former president, which unexpectedly rejected assignment of association agreement with the European Union. Then it was followed by arrival of Russian military forces to Crimea. And then this process spread across the eastern regions of Ukraine. I would like just to show you that on this map you may see that all iron and steel mills, as well as rolled steel producers, are located in these blue areas. So almost exactly the region where this conflict area is now. If we make a closer view of this map, so here I just plotted these four regions separately, we see that some companies like Metinvest, they have their mills and production plants in the military area. Here only large financial industrial groups are plotted. We have also as well some smaller mills. In general, we have 17 steel producers in Ukraine. 4 of them completely shut down their production facilities because of different reasons, not only because of the conflict. And 3 mills are located exactly in the military area. Here you can see on the left the diagram which illustrates development of production volumes in Ukraine since 2007. We clearly see that there are 2 lowest output values in 2009 after the crisis of 2008, and last year we have absolutely the lowest value since over a decade. Ukrainian steel market or production is in Ukraine is divided among several financial industrial groups. Of course, Metinvest is the largest one, which shares almost 50% of Ukrainian market of steel output. And then we have 2 another groups, and by others I mean these all smaller mills, which has less share. Ukrainian metallurgy, and I would say industry in general, is one of the most energy intensive or energy and raw material consuming industries in the world. This is of course due to mostly outdated technologies and equipment which we still use. We have open hearth furnaces still, so I'm not sure, but I think we are the only country in the world, maybe in China there is still one. This is of course not good, but as far as I know, Metinvest mills, they use even this old technology and produce maximally possible, you know, high, well, not high, but with enough quality and, well, more or less good results of production costs. So open hearth furnaces share is about 20% this year, but in 2007 it was over 40%, as you may see. So we built a couple of small mills with electric furnaces, and that's why this share increased. Another hot question now is gas supply and its future prices. This is, of course, very important for our economy and industry, as we import gas from Russia, and the price has been increased over several years substantially. But if we look to this structure of production costs, steel production costs, we see that the share of natural gas is 4.5%, so which means is not very significant for steel producers. It might be critical only in case of direct injection of natural gas to furnaces. Below the diagram, you can see three figures. This is consumption or usage of scrap for the production of crude steel. You see that the highest level is for electric furnaces, is over 1 ton of scrap, and roughly 300 kilograms for open hearth furnaces, and blast oxygen furnaces consume 220 kilograms per ton of crude steel. This is just to have an impression, on scrap sourcing in Ukraine. Almost 80% of domestic steel scrap comes from old machinery and equipment of the plants. So I called it dormant scrap, but I'm not really sure if it's the correct word. You see automotive scrap, public utilities, household and other scrap, the share is like altogether about 20%. And now we have quite a big problem with automotive scrap, because I know only couple of small companies which recycle passenger cars or tractors, these vehicles in a modern way, so with technologies. Otherwise, these cars are just staying somewhere, and oxidizing. So, this is, by the way, a very good opportunity, I think, for European or Turkish companies to try to sell equipment, because as far as I know, again, many companies, they are ready to buy this equipment because they realize that this segment is quite large in Ukraine. This slide is about Ukrainian ferro scrap exports. While the largest consumer of Ukrainian scrap has been Turkey in 2013, Moldova also has a share of about 23%. In 2014, last year, almost 82% of Ukrainian steel scrap was exported to Turkey. This diagram on the right top indicates that last year the export was about 1/3 of incoming scrap or domestic trade volumes. This is not connected with some market development. In our country, Ministry of Economic Development and Trade, every year they calculate the volume of steel scrap which should be delivered or shipped to domestic mills, and the rest is normally allowed to be exported. But for example, in 2013, we see that the export volume was extremely low for Ukraine, and this was exactly because of our ministry. In fact, after March, I suppose, 2030, they rejected export, and it was not allowed to do it. That's why in 2014 the figure is so high. This is the slide where I will try to say some words about Ukrainian raw materials imports. If you look at the diagram on the left, you see that the pattern or the trend is inconsistent. So we again see that there are some drops or high values, but there is no clear trend. I have to mention that only large companies, normally this is mills which belong to large financial industrial groups, they can afford importing steel scrap or raw materials in order to subsequently mix it with cheaper and lower quality Ukrainian scrap. And we have to keep in mind that import duty is 5% for steel scrap, so this of course increases substantially production costs. We could substitute steel scrap by DRI or HBI, but unfortunately we do not produce this raw material. So some mills try to import this raw material from Russia, but again the prices are too high as compared to steel scrap, and for the moment it doesn't make any sense. Otherwise our prices, steel prices, will be so high, so we would not be able to compete with in foreign markets. Ukraine is the second largest producer of crude steel in CIS. We follow Russia. Russia is the largest, of course, and the share of Ukraine is about 26%. If you see the diagram since 2008, you see that every year the share figure was more or less similar, roughly higher than 20%. The same situation is with rebar production. Well, I have to say also that in 2014, Ukraine production of crude steel and rebar and wire rod declined by about 17%. So the same picture for rebar. Also, the share is very similar, about 20%. And again, Russia is over 60%. So here the picture is also more or less similar, but the volumes are low. So we produce just slightly higher than 1.5 million last year. In order to compete the operation, in order to compare operation of production facilities, I tried to make these three tables where I indicated total amount of furnaces, operated furnaces, and furnaces which shut down. You see that nothing changed for the mills which use electric arc furnaces. This is because they all situated in the region which is quite far from the military area now. And number of operating oxygen furnaces and open hearth furnaces, of course, declined. Here I plotted also the logos of our three mills. These are not as large mills as Metinvest or ESD, but at least they use electric arc furnaces. This is a diagram which demonstrates total figures of exports, long products exports. The blue one is wire rod, red is rebar, and the green one is sections and rails, so the long products except rebar and wire rod. You see that the share of rebar and wire rod is over 75% almost every year. Yeah, as I already said, production figures declined and export volumes also decreased last year as compared to 2013. Here is the geographical pattern. So you see that Ukraine's largest rebar export market in 2013 was Russia, with the share of 35%. and then followed by Iraq, Azerbaijan, and other countries. In 2014, the situation has changed. So Russia is now the second largest export market. This is connected, of course, affected by this conflict situation. And another reason is Russia increased production of rebar on their new facilities. So that's why the volume declined and export to Russia declined. Well, the pattern for wire rod is not as clear. You see this nice rainbow, so with many countries. This is really a real picture, you know, so we export small volumes to almost all the countries in Europe, Middle East, Turkey, of course. So more or less similar situation is 2014, but I have to mention that we exported to Turkey 15% of the total export volume. Well, actually Ukraine is also one of the largest global exporters of steel billet. Last year we exported over 5 million tons of billet, and mostly, of course, to Turkey and Middle East. Here you can see it. So there are also this year countries like Lebanon appeared, and not just appeared. It was country #1 last year. But you see that also Turkey has a significant amount. Well, import of long products, you see that the picture here is quite different from exports. The share of rebar and wire rod is roughly 20%. So all the rest, sections mostly, are imported. Well, this is just to have an idea of figures. Steel billet imports is almost nothing, you know. Last year it was less than 5,000 tons. And it came from Russia. And I think rebar and wire rod imports have almost the same figures, so it's they not exceed 40,000 tons annual. Over 95% of imported billet and wire rod came from Russia last year as well as in 2013. But again, volumes were insignificant. My colleagues also started to speak about price trends in Europe, globally. So here I indicated Ukrainian export prices for steel scrap, billet, rebar and wire rod. You see, if we plot it in such a scale, it looks like it was more or less stable. But if we change the scale, we see that prices started falling quite rapidly and significantly since October 2014, last year. Well, of course, many factors are hiding behind this trend. So this is global price decline, cheaper raw materials, weaker euro, devaluation of our local currency. So, but I think in this case we have more or less similar problems with everybody. So this is more following of global trend. It's not just in Ukraine. Couple of words as a summary. So Ukrainian, as I already said, Ukrainian market of long steel products is the second largest in CIS. I have to say also that in recent years, consumption of long products in Ukraine has been decreasing by 3 to 7% annually. Last year it declined by 7%. This year, at least the figures I already have, they demonstrate that the trend is even more intensive. And of course, the share of imported raw steel increases because we need to substitute somehow missing volumes of raw steel. Again, Ukrainian steel industry is divided among several financial industrial groups. The largest one is Metinvest. Ukrainian raw steel produces smaller mills or plants which do not belong to these financial groups. They now, especially, they cannot compete in foreign markets because of higher production costs, higher delivery costs. They do not have possibility to buy cheaper iron or steel scrap. So I think that in future we should expect that some small mills they will shut down, unfortunately. Major consuming industries are construction, of course, and machine building. The other industries account just 12%. Unlike Russia, Ukraine imports long steel products from a wide range of countries. This I already showed you the pattern. So we buy cheap Asian products, and by the way, this type of products from China, the share is increasing, and sometimes even expensive material from Europe. What was the impact of this crisis or war conflict? Already now, 4 large steel makers in eastern Ukraine has completely shut down their facilities due to military action. And Finnish steel producers, they were faced and are faced now with difficulties related to disruptions of supply of raw materials, semi-finished products, electricity, natural gas, and logistics in general. So given these military events in Ukraine, in the near future we could expect a significant decline of production volumes, and in the very optimistic case, or scenario, this year output volumes would reach the last year figures, but I think they will be definitely lower, and of course rolled steel. Ukrainian suppliers find it difficult to perform export contracts now, being affected by currency exchange fluctuations, limited cash availability, and especially by financial restrictions of our national bank, because now there are really tough problems for our enterprises to buy currency, euro, dollar, and to proceed or to perform their contracts. Structural shapes or sections, they are among the most demanded types of steel products in Ukrainian market. As I already said, we mostly export major volumes, over 80% of rebar and wire rod. And the sections are mostly consumed domestically. So, given expected decline of production, missing volumes of raw steel will be substituted by additional imports. Also, consumers will mainly consider price over quality. It already happens now, so many companies, they buy cheaper Chinese rolled products, and sometimes quality is not that important. Well, in short term, consumption of long products is expected to decline further due to negative trends in machine building and construction sectors. So, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, I will answer with pleasure.